you realised that you had to confront your fears, and so you made a fear pyramid, and it was something that you hadn't seen anywhere else. This was your own doing.
Yeah, I was in the pit of a depression, and it always seemed to come into my life and just sweep through and wipe me out, and just like it was like living beings were coming into my house and saying, "Yeah, we're here. We're going to stay as long as we like, and we're never going to go away. You're never going to get rid of us." And this time it came in, and I was in that same place. I was terrified of it. I can remember sitting in my hallway downstairs, and this rush of depression coming into me. I remember screaming upstairs to my wife, shouting, like, take this out of me. Because I knew once it was in, I'd have it in me for months, and it would wipe my life out, and it was the most painful thing. But this time I just remember finding courage, and I think this was my first communion with my soul. And I just felt this courage where I just thought, I'm not doing this, I'm not having this anymore. I've got a wife, I've got kids. I've got a life to live. There's things I want to do. Can't be bullied by these feelings anymore. And I remember just thinking, I'm not having this. Then this idea just came, like, write everything down that you're afraid of. Everything. I mean, just writing things down that you're afraid of is overcoming a fear, because you don't even want to admit that you're afraid of them. So I just drew a pyramid on a piece of paper, and I wrote each of my fears on one step of the pyramid. Least fear at the bottom, worst fear at the top. Then I systematically started to confront these fears. And some of them, as soon as I wrote them down, some of them disappeared as soon as I wrote them down. Other ones I had to confront 2 or 3 times. Some of them went once, some of them, but what I was doing was basically what Ushaba said, which was absorbing 99% of the feeling. And just the curiosity, instead of going, I'm being battered by depression, I'm frightened of everything, I started to be curious. I wonder if I did this, what would happen? I wonder if I went and got a spider and picked it up, what would that do? How would that feel? What if I went to the dentist and what if I went to the dentist? What if I just flood myself? What if I'm afraid of karate tournaments? What if I go and do 10 in a row? Or what if I'm frightened of I'm frightened of water? What if I just go and spend 2 weeks, take 2 weeks off work and go and spend 2 weeks every single day just getting in and out of the water? I've started to be curious, and the brain has a strange quirk. It can't deal with fear and curiosity at the same time. As soon as you bring curiosity in, the sting of fear goes. So I still had background noise of fear and a bit of adrenaline, but suddenly I was going, I'm going to live differently. I'm going to confront these things. And of course, the moment I started to, what I didn't realise I was doing was that by overcoming fears and confronting fears, I was winning back territories. I was finding the territories in me that were invaded by fears, beliefs, concepts, precepts, all of these things. And I was winning them back. And every time I won a territory back, I was a bit stronger. A bit wiser.
You're describing the behaviour of my first dog. That when he used to, just thinking about the curiosity aspect, when he used to see something that made him very uncomfortable, he wouldn't run away. You would see he was really unsettled, but their curiosity is more greater than their fear. So what he would do, he would go very carefully, kind of sniff it, and then jump if it moved or whatever he was curious about. And he would keep returning to the same thing non-stop until he was totally fine with it. And it was just...
Well, that was my first article for Terry O'Neill's Fighting Arts International. Confrontation, desensitisation. Confront things. I had a certainty. I had overcome fears. I'd become a nightclub bouncer because that was my ultimate fear. And suddenly I'd got something to write about. So I started to write about it, and people saw the truth in it. So it's about being curious. It's about saying, okay, this depression keeps coming, and the doctor tells me I've got a chemical imbalance or something, and I can listen to that if I want. But actually, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to probe it. I'm going to look at it. It's a living. Eckhart Tolle calls it a semi-autonomous thought form. It's a living entity. It feeds off misery. It feeds off pain. It feeds off human essence. So you go, I'm going to look at this.
You won't be settled until you fully understand it.
No,
and you'll always be in the grip of this thing that's much bigger than once.
Well, you haven't got free will. If you are held back by a fear or by an anxiety or by your own body biology, then you haven't got free will, because it means if you want to go over here, but there's a block of fear there, it means you can't go there. If you wanted to, people always say they're not addicted to alcohol, but if you asked them not to drink for 2 weeks on holiday, they probably couldn't do it. Or if you asked them to stop doing it, they'd probably say, well, I could, but I don't want to. So they haven't got free will. They haven't got complete free will. So the idea is that this was an exercise in me winning my will back.
Another thing that went on your fear pyramid that I thought was really interesting was blame.
Yeah.
You took blame. So you wanted to take ownership and take full responsibility, and to do that you couldn't blame. And I think a lot of us do. A lot of us blame.
It's disempowering. The problem with blame is, the moment I blame you, I've given you my will. You've got my free will. It means it can't be fixed until you fix it. If I'm blaming the government, they're great to blame because we don't see them. We see images on television, but it's a great body. I remember this guy who'd spent most of his life, having heart attacks and getting very ill because he was so angry at the local council, and he got this back and forth with them, writing letters to them, and ongoing arguments. But he thought the council was a body, and it wasn't. It was just several individuals that he wrote to, and it ended up dominating his whole life. So the idea is that the moment we blame somebody, we disempower ourselves. I can't be fixed until the government fixes it. I can't be fixed until my wife fixes it. I can't be fixed until, ultimately until God fixes it. So I can blame everybody. But actually, when I blame anybody, I completely disempower myself. So the idea is that we take responsibility for everything.
Yeah, and there's always places that you can improve, and if you blame, you don't look at the things that you did wrong.
You've got to take ownership for everything.
Yep.
I think it was Julian of Norwich who was a great mystic, Catholic mystic. She had a moment of clarity with God, and he said, everything is your fault. Mm-hmm. Everything in the world is your fault. And he was saying, take ownership of everything. Whatever's happening in your world, you need to change yourself. You need to center yourself. If you can really center yourself, find that singularity. There are no enemies, there's no need for arms. There's no illnesses, there's no need for remedies. I'm talking about the ultimate aim. That's the top of the Maslowian, hierarchy. But that's ultimately what we should be aiming for, to take full responsibility. So if when I was parked outside Sharon's mum's once, we were inside having a cup of tea, I had my posh Jag outside, and somebody ran into the back of my car like it was invisible. And I knew it was my fault. Obviously, I didn't get in touch with the insurance people and say, listen, it's a metaphysical thing. It was me, I drew it karmically to myself. I'm slightly out of balance. I still work with the world. I still have to work through the processes, but I was able to go out, and this girl was, bereft because she just ran into the back of an XKR. So it's going to be an expensive insurance thing, but I just said, come in, have a cup of tea. Everybody wanted to get upset, but I didn't let them, because I just said, come in, have a cup of tea, don't worry about it. It's just a car at the end of the day. And I just went home and I went to my prayers and I said, where am I out of balance? Show me where I'm out of balance. I know this is me. That's the level of ownership that I'm not asking anybody to do this level of ownership, but I want autonomy, and I want complete autonomy. Means winning my own will back and then giving that autonomy over to the Tao. So to do that, we have to take responsibility for whatever's going on in our life.
I think at the very starting point of how people can build to that level of ownership is just looking at every day-to-day actions.
Yeah.
If something happens that they blame, they can just stop for a second and say, what part did I have in this?
Yeah.
And how could I change it? And a lot of successful people, actually, they will never blame.
No.
If something goes wrong.
Why is this in my life?
Yeah. And on all levels, if something happens in a company that someone doesn't perform, I've heard a lot of successful people saying, where could I have stepped in?
Yeah.
Why didn't I see that?
Yeah.
It doesn't
matter.
Like
about someone said to me before, I'm trying to forgive this person at work. What would you do? I said, I'd ask myself, what am I doing in my life to allow that person to bully me? I'm not saying that it's acceptable, that it's right. All I'm saying is that at some level we're letting that happen.
Yep.
And that might just be our fear of being uncomfortable, of saying to somebody, don't talk to me like that. that's not kind, so we have to learn to catch these things really early and kill them, because they tend to climb in through tiny little things. Jung said he would get little flatteries coming into his head, tiny little flatteries about what a great guy he was and how innovative he was, and the moment he indulged them, he said he opened himself up to this sudden attack of criticism and all the rest of it. So blame is disempowerment. We don't play the blame game. It doesn't mean, if there are issues within our work and with what's going on, it doesn't mean we don't look at how we can fix it. But the responsibility is still for me to fix it. Because if it's happening in my world, I want to know where I'm out of balance. I had 3, I called it my vanity crashes. I had 3 crashes with my very posh Jag until I got the message. The vanity crashes showed me that I had vanity. It showed me that I was so. It showed me that I had so much external bling because I had no internal worth. And it was saying to me, you don't need this external bling. If you're not shining from the inside out, you're not shining. So it would say you don't need all this stuff to validate you. You don't need the posh clothes or the big car, and you don't need the big house. You don't need all that stuff. Actually, the more centered you are, the less you need. And if you can get rid of all that external bling, because that just feeds the ego, you'll shine from the inside out, and it will echo across the world. So this is that thing we said before about contracting in order to expand. So for me, it was about complete ownership. Why has this happened to me? What do I need to tighten up on? And sometimes I've not wanted to look at it because it's so painful. Because you just go, I don't want that confrontation. I don't want to have to say that. But actually, I learned to say it with kindness to people. I would learn to anchor it with touch. And I'd learn to use very kind words, so they were truthful, but they were kind, and they were coming from the right place. So it's about complete ownership, and it's about not blaming. It's about just thinking, okay, what can I do with this? I could sit down all day long and say, I was abused when I was 11, and that damaged my life. I would have been successful if it wasn't for that. But actually what I looked at was the fact that when I looked at it metaphysically, I had this massive reservoir of rage, dissonance, anger, massive amount of energy that I could direct somewhere beautiful. I could convert it. I am the prodigal son. I come back to God and I bring all that energy and I convert it. So I've got a gift because of what's happened to me. I know when I did an interview with when I first met your daughter yes. Andrea, and because she'd been abused, I said to her, we're special. We have access to a massive amount of energy. We can make something with that. If we can take ourselves to a place of denotation, in other words, take the label off this energy. It's not dissonance. It's not anger. It's not rage. It's not hurt. It's not a wound. It's just energy. That person that's abused me, I can take all that energy that they've stored inside me, all of those parasites, and I can clean it and convert it and create something prolific with it. I have lived a prolific life because I've taken the energy and I've used it as a gift. I've brought it through, I've processed it through my body, and I've created prolifically with it. But again, you can't do that if you haven't got the will to do it. You have to have a very, very strong will. Your soul has to be like tungsten. If you look at the tungsten band that connects the negative and positive terminals in a light bulb to create light, it's processed and it's put through processes of burning and scalding and boiling. It's put through these tremendous processes so that it can absorb the heat that comes into it and create light. It's got a very, very high burning point. So we have to develop our will to at a very high burning point so that we can place ourselves, we can drag all this reservoir of energy and create something massive from it. So if there's kids out there now who are full of all of this negativity and anger and hurt and pain, it's a gift. It's a gift. I know it's painful. I'm not underestimating that, but it's a gift. You just got to find a way to clean it and process it.
Well, which brings us to chapter 4, because one of the things that you said in it, which I think I would say affects a lot of people, is the fear of getting above your station.
Yeah.
So you want to achieve greatness, but there's for all sorts of reasons.
Our conditioning.
Yeah, your conditioning. You think if you suddenly said, Geoff, the factory worker, I'm a writer, you would have been mocked for being pretentious.
Yeah.
And that was something that held you back.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Krishnamurti. Because sometimes you're thinking, I've got these tremendous energies trying to stop me from creating, because they're saying, who do you think you are? You're nobody. Don't get above your station. Don't get above yourself. What you think you're special, do you? Well, actually, I actually do think I'm special. Of course I am. I'm in charge of this vehicle which has got billions and billions of cells. I actually have the ability to create. I can access causation. That's a gift from God. So yeah, of course I'm special, even if I can't do it yet. So yeah, so the idea is that I've got that ability, so I am special, and people. But everybody's special. I'm special, but so is everybody. But people feel, because of conditioning, they feel as though that some people can be creatives, some people can't. Some people can be successful, some people can't. But and what I liked about Krishnamurti was that he said, we wonder why we're battling against this, because we just think it's a few years old. But he said, actually, it's tens of thousands of years old. This conditioning has been, passed on from generation to generation. So when you're taking on conditioning, you're taking on thousands of years worth of beliefs, of precepts, laws, and you're taking on your community, you're taking on your religion, you're taking on your family. You've got to be prepared to lose all of them. You've got to be prepared to challenge all of them. That's what you have to do. You're actually not just changing a job, you're changing a reality. It's a paradigm shift. So it's very difficult. So this idea that some people can create and that some people can't, and that there's a class system, all of it is, they're just concepts, they're just ideas. If we don't believe in class, if we don't believe in colour and creed, if we don't believe in difference, we just believe in universality, that everybody's connected, then anybody can do anything. Everything is possible. Of course it is. So for me it was about stripping away, taking these emotions and challenging them. When I felt it was impossible for someone like me to write, I had to become a published writer in order to break that fear. And even when I published my first book, even when I'd got a published book in my hand, I said to one of my friends, I think I might, try and do something with this. Maybe I could make a living. And he said, don't be getting above yourself, Geoff. He says, you've had a bit of luck getting a book published, but he says, don't be getting ahead of yourself. And I said to him, oh no, you're right. Yeah, of course you're right. Then I went away and thought, no, he's not right. I've got proof. If I can do it once, why can't I do it twice? Why can't I do it 10 times?
Well, this is another thing that you go on to write, is that it's not just your beliefs, but you share these beliefs. You share what you call your comfort zone with people.
Yeah,
and the moment you come out of that comfort zone, you create a void.
Yeah.
And then, as you said before, you have to be prepared to lose people.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you come out, they're going to close that void.
You have to be prepared to lose everybody. You have to, and some of them you won't just lose them. They'll attack you. They'll attack you on the way out. So you have to be prepared to do it. Everybody wants to hate you, but when you're successful, everybody wants to say they sat next to you at school.
So it's people who have a dream, who are sharing, who are going through sort of the regular 9 to 5s, and they're sharing that space with people. I think they do have to ask, who are the people that I'm sharing with? How would they look at me if I succeed? Are they encouraging me to succeed? But a lot of the time as well, your success also shows them where they could be.
What they could do.
A lot of the criticism isn't necessarily, it's coming from a place of envy. Yeah. Without them even realizing.
Sometimes it's coming from a place of fear. Sometimes it's coming from a place of dissonance. People are embarrassed. People were embarrassed by my ambition, because I always had that feeling we could do anything, but it got battered. I was battered like a beach seal. But there were other people that encouraged me. There were other people that said, it's great, it's exciting. It wasn't, but that fear of being pretentious, that fear of, even right up until recently, I could feel bits of it. When we did the musical at the Belgrade Theatre, I did a musical based on Tom Clark's album, We'll Live and Die in These Towns. And I can remember a moment when I sat with the designer and the exec producer in the theatre, and they said, oh, by the way, Geoff, we're changing we're not going to do it in this space, which is a bigger space. We're going to do it in that space, which is a smaller space. And I can remember this feeling rising up in me, like these were two middle-class professionals treating me like a piece of shit. And I promise you, part of me got up and said, fuck yeah, and I walked out. And I managed to contain myself, and my friend Hamish, who was the executive director, said to me, how do you feel about that? And I said, not good. And he goes, really? And he knew. And I gathered myself and I said, look, I'm sorry. I said, I'm overreacting. I said, if you think it should be in that space, we'll put it in that space. But I felt like I'd been massively disrespected. I hadn't, but this working class chip rose up. I didn't know it was there. It rose up and it wanted to sabotage the whole thing. If I'd have kicked off then, I'd have lost the musical, I'd have lost the space, I'd have lost my respect with those people. So I went back home, I meditated, and I wrote to them both and apologised and said, I overreacted, I apologise. I said, wherever you want to put it, if they want to do it in the car park, I'm happy. But, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, that working class chip, and I was like 58 at the time, that working class chip still came up. But in that moment of watching it and then dismissing it, I was able to clean it a little bit more. So maybe it'll keep coming through. Maybe there'll always be points where it'll come through. But if it rises up, it's dangerous for it. This energy, this semi-autonomous thought form is very vulnerable when it presents itself for you to engage it. Because either it rises to claim or be claimed. If you're able to observe it and not identify with it, it will dissipate. It's weakened if it's not engaged. So I was able to dismiss that. I ended up working for about 3 months with Hamish and the designer, and they were the nicest men. There would not be a part of them would have thought like that about me. Not even a part of them. It was just what was in me.
Because
that environment brought it out, and I was able to see it and stop myself from sabotaging.
Because ultimately you were coming from a place of artistry, and that's what the language that they connected with.
Yeah. And they would have been, they're middle class professionals. They would have been very afraid of, this uncouth aggression, and this insecurity. They would have been very afraid of that. But as it was, they were patient with me, and I just said, I made an error, and I fixed it there and then. It was probably the best experience of my creative life, that musical. It was so overwhelmingly beautiful, the whole thing. Yeah. It was,
we're going to get to that in a minute. It's something that you've touched on before, but it was just chapter 5. It was about going on the door, that you reduced everything to the essentials. Yeah. As you call it, an acid bath. I mean, you take that into your writing, you take that into all sorts. But just talk to us about.
You can see it in my life now. I've got this new place, what I've bought now, where I've reduced everything in my life. So I'm just living in a smaller place that I live in every inch of it. My body is just about the right size. There's nothing in my body superfluous. There's nothing in my mind superfluous. My life is just about serving God. My life is just about doing the work. That's it. I've reduced everything so that I'm just serving God.
And just on a very basic level,
on the door,
because I do see it very connected. Yeah. And just on a raw language, if you didn't have the essentials on the door, what would happen?
Well, like I said, the environment. As soon as you come on, the egregore in the environment says, "This is Geoff. This is where he is. This is what he's got. This is his arsenal. 95% of it's no good."
How did you find that out of interest?
Just by standing there and watching the raw aggression and watching the confrontation. And I knew immediately that what I'd got wouldn't work. It needed to be adapted. It needed to be reduced. And when I stopped trying to I used to watch videos of me fighting, in gangs. There was like gang fights and stuff. And I'd watch videos of me afterwards because it was all on CCTV. And I tried to say, that was a karate move, wasn't it? And I think that was a bit of our karate. And I sat with one of my black belts and we were going, that was a block, that was it. And I looked at it afterwards and I thought, I'm afraid to tell myself that what I've been taught won't work here. Yeah. And the moment I saw that, I was able to let go of it. And then I just said, okay, show me what works. And I reduced, I was a second or a third dan at the time, and I reduced everything I got to one punch.
I mean, it's a great metaphor for life.
Yeah,
if you think about how much...
it was so raw, Paul. It was so effective. I had to stop doing it. It was so effective.
Didn't Peter Constantine tell you, you don't hit people with that, do you?
Yeah, when I first met Peter Constantine, I met when Peter was doing a forward to my book. I met him on a service station up north, and it was in the car park, and he was showing me his double hip punch on the pads, and he's awesome. He's really an amazing guy. And he said, "Show me how you work." And he held the pad and hit it with the left hook, and he said, "Fucking hell, you don't hit people with that, do you?" The problem was I did. I was hitting everyone with it, but it was so effective. I got it down to a fine art that you're kind of knocking everybody out. So in and of itself, that wouldn't be worth telling you, because I'm not interested in violence. But the overall thing of it was amazing, because it was saying the environment will if you listen to it, it will strip everything away. So all you have left is the raw essential. Mm-hmm. And to get that, you have to practice. And I'll tell you a little story. I'll tell you a metaphysical story about this. I was sitting, Costa's been closed, as you know, so I used to just sit outside in the wind and the rain with my book and sit and read with a coffee. And one day, this looked like a fly, but when on examination afterwards, I realised it was something else. A fly landed on my page as I was reading this book. And I looked at this fly and I thought, fucking hell, this fly is amazing. It was just like I was being blown around by this wind, and this fly was negotiating it like it was nothing. But when I looked at it, it had nothing on it other than the raw essential. It had nothing on it but what it needed. It flew over, it landed on my page right above 3 words: practice, practice, practice. And I looked at it and I knew it was a messenger. I knew it was an angelic. Anything winged is angelic. And I could see it wasn't a fly, it was a being of some sort. I know that sounds very weird, but I looked at it and I just said, thank you, I appreciate it. And then I watched it fly into the wind, and it was like it was nothing. I thought, the reason this fly is so proficient and able to manage these tremendous forces is because it has nothing on it that is extraneous, nothing at all. It was saying to me, get rid of everything in your life that's extraneous. If it doesn't serve your purpose to serve God, get rid of it. And it was so inspiring. But that was a fly. But I see God in everything. So the idea on the door was that immediately the environment said, this is what works. The moment I saw that's what worked, that's what I started to practice. That's what I started to teach. That's what I started to perfect. And then later on I was able to let go of the need to hit people, and I started to think, okay, how can I use that same lesson, that same rawness in my business, in my relationships, in my life, with my children? How can I use that same lesson
in your health?
With my health, of course.
Everything.
So I started to. That's why I ended up becoming a vegan. I got rid of everything in my life that was excessive. I started looking at my relationship with my wife and thought, the raw essential with this is for me to serve her with no expectations. And when I did that, everything I wanted came. With my business, all I thought about was my customer. I never thought about myself. I just would think, what does my customer need? How can I serve them?
I think life throws, modern life, it attaches constantly.
Yeah.
It's always trying to attach things to you.
Yeah.
Through consumerism, through diet, everything is excess. We've got we could be stripped down to
I had a meditation with Gandhi once, and I said to him, how can I improve? And he said, make yourself small. And I love that, because he was a very small, physically small guy, but his consciousness was massive. And I spoke to Uri Geller on the phone, and he was working with a friend of mine, and I spoke to him on the phone, and I said, Uri, how can I improve? And he said, expand. And they were both saying the same thing. Right. Yeah. We expand our conscious net, and it automatically reduces our ego. When we reduce our ego, it automatically expands our conscious net. So when we reduce the animal part of us, the soul part of us expands. When we expand the soul part of us, like through meditation and stuff like that, the animal part of us immediately contracts. So we contract and expand.
Yep. So going on to chapter 6, which I love this chapter. I loved this thing where you said, because you were talking about writing your first book, your first ever book, and you said, which I think is very relevant to all artists, that you never imagined your first working office would be a factory toilet, and you'd be writing on cheap notepads, which is quite beautiful, really, because you didn't need much to create.
No,
I think a lot of, I've come across people who do say, well, once I have this or once I have this, then I will produce my masterpiece. But creativity will out. I didn't have any of that stuff. I didn't even know anybody that owned a typewriter. My world was very small, but I had stories to tell, and I was telling them. They were spilling out of me. And you were, you were actually working in the factory.
Yeah, I was working as a floor sweeper. Yeah,
right. And then you would steal the time to write your book in the toilet.
I'd get ahead of my job, and then I'd go into the toilet and spend time every day in the toilet, and I'd write. I finished the book. I think I wrote, was it 3 full notepads. I wrote "Watch My Back" anyway in this toilet. And it was raw, it was essential, it was just telling the stories. I was practicing telling the stories around the canteen in the factory. I would tell the guys of what happened the night before, the good stuff, the bad stuff, because working the doors in Coventry was a bit like a mix of Sodom and Gomorrah and Pompeii brothel. It was exciting, it was exhilarating, it was colourful, it was violent. But it was such a charismatic environment, and I was telling the stories. So I realised I was a natural storyteller, and they were coming out, and I just wrote them down as I told them. Because I realised when I sat down in the canteen, the moment I started telling the story, I'd have a crowd around me. So I would tell the stories, and then when I wrote it, I just told it like that. Then later on, because I didn't know anybody who could type it out for me. This is before internet, and my friend Steve, he was the one that suggested I write it down. He said, my sister's got a typewriter, she'll type it. So she typed it onto clean white paper, and suddenly it felt like a bit of a book. Yeah. Then I had something I could take somewhere. So I went to the local newspaper, the Coventry Telegraph, and I spoke to one of the journalists there. And I said, I think I might have written a book. I just wondered if you could have a look at it. And
you think you've written a book?
Yeah, I think I give her a way out. I said, I don't know if it's any good. So, I give her a little way out. And she said, she was really kind. She said, before I even read it, she said, there's 15 journalists upstairs who all want to write a book, and none of them have. So you've already done better than them.
There you go.
So however this reads. Anyway, when I went back, her name was Sue Lowry. When I went back, she said, this is really good. She said, you've got a real voice. There's a great turn of phrase. She said, it's funny. The description is very good, but you need more. She said, you just need some more. You need more of what you've got. So I went away. And she said, just imagine you're in the room and tell me about the smells, the sounds. What does it feel like? What's the touch like? Just colour it in a little bit. So I went away and I doubled it. That's when we started to send it out to publishers.
Yeah, but it was just that initial seed. That's what I found. That's what I identified with it as well. Well,
that's what I always loved about you. When I first met you, I always say to people, I said, you want to meet Paul Shammasian? I said, this is a guy that can't go to a christening without filming it. He films everything. I said, he's a director. He said he's compelled to, I said, what I loved about Paul was when he first come to me, I said he'd been to Las Vegas, he'd been to different places in the world and took his camera and he's making films. He wasn't waiting for permission. He wasn't waiting for anyone to doff their hat at him or pay him. He said he came down and did a documentary about me because he was interested. I said, he makes films. I said, because someone said to Sharon once, my wife said, how do I become a writer? She said, writers write.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I could probably spend, 100 pages telling you that, but she just said, writers write. Directors direct. They don't sit in cafes talking about directing. They direct. They feel compelled to. That's like me. I feel compelled to tell stories, to write them down. I receive a great deal of pleasure when the words come through me because I know they're not from me. They pick up all my flavours and my stories, but they're not from me. Mm-hmm. I know they come from somewhere else. So there's a great pleasure in delivering them. It's also painful because it mixes with my stuff I need to clean. It mixes with the stuff I need to look at. Like, for instance, Gabriela, my Insta manager, sent me something to write about yesterday about Parents' Day. And what I've written is beautiful, but it was painful to write because I had to write that I wasn't a good parent. I wasn't. I was a young, selfish, arrogant dad. I love my kids. I love their bones, And they wouldn't tell you that I wasn't a good dad, but I know I wasn't. I'm a good dad now, and I'm making up for it, you know, but I wasn't good. So it was painful. But there was also a great pleasure in saying to people, I made a mistake. And hopefully someone else might read that and go, well, I'm still 21, I've got time.
Yeah.
Because I said, you know, I'm trying to make up for lost time. But lost time is lost, isn't it? It's gone. I can't go and talk to my kids when they were young. I can't talk to them anymore. I struggle to look at photographs of my kids when they're little. They were so beautiful, and I did absolutely adore them, and I was, you know, I love them, but I know I was selfish. I know I didn't think about them enough, you know.
But you're looking at that, and you're writing about the and which brings me on to the second question, actually.
So the point I was making was that it's painful as well.
Yeah,
you know?
Which is actually in chapter 6, when you first wrote your book, and you gave it to your brother Ray.
Yeah.
And he said, Geoff, are you sure you want to publish this? And you asked why, and he said, because it makes you look really vulnerable. And you said to him, what's the point of writing a book? What's the point of writing anything if you're not vulnerable, or if you're not honest? I
knew that way back then. I knew it, that it's not going to help anybody. When I was depressed and, you know, dying, you know, literally dying, you know, you feel like you're dying when you're depressed. It's a feeling like nothing else. I remember getting books and the blurb on the back would promise to give you the secret and tell you how to overcome these feelings, and they didn't. And I knew the writers were afraid to be honest. They were afraid to be vulnerable. And I remember saying, when I find the truth, I'm going to tell everybody. And that's what I've continued to try to do ever since. Because who is it going to help? It's not going to help me as a writer, because I'm just working 2 layers deep. I want to go fathoms deep, and it's not going to help the reader because they're not going to see themselves in there. So you have to be vulnerable, vulnerable to the point of surrender, so that you get out of your own way and you let the story come through you, and you let it pick up all of your elements and clean them as it goes. Well, I didn't realise then, though, Paul, that I'd accidentally triggered on the secret. The big Judaic secret, like if you look at the tree of life, the Kabbalic tree of life, the secret is to receive in order to share. If you receive in order to share, you will never be short. There will always be in abundance. And that can't just be a few lines at the end of your mission statement. It's got to be your raison d'etre. Like I said, that, you know, I said, when I find the truth, I'm going to tell everybody. So God, give me the truth. And then I told everybody. I said to God recently, I was meditating, I said, look, I'm trying to talk to people about forgiveness. And I said, and I understand the power of it, but I can't articulate it very well. I need to understand it better. Can you help me with that? Because I want to be able to articulate it so that people go, well, of course I'm going to forgive. Now I understand what it is. I can do it. I said, because nobody seems to be articulating that it's not about pardoning somebody. It's about giving them over to a greater force that can pardon them. And about 2 days later, this idea came into my head for 99 reasons to forgive. But it didn't just come through as an idea. I wrote it straight away, but also came through with 110 hours of lecture from a Jewish rabbi on repentance and forgiveness. 110 hours. God saying to me, I'm going to bring this through, but you're going to have to look at it from every aspect. I went into the Buddhist aspect of, you know, he gave me the exegesis of Buddhism about what forgiveness is, as a sense in, you know, about giving it over to this greater force, about taking, you know, denoting it and all the rest of it. So there was a massive amount of work, but it was also very exciting because I'm listening to 110 hours, and sometimes it's the same stuff repeated again and again and again, and then suddenly you go, it clicks with you, and then when you know it and you're certain about it, you have the responsibility then to pass it on. Because if you ask for something in order to share and you don't share it, it stays stagnant in you. It creates illness. It creates pestilence. We have to honour our covenant. So I don't ask unless I'm certain that I'm prepared to sit down and put it on paper. And I've got to be certain that I'm going to be able to sit in front of someone like Russell Brand or you know, Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson and be able to articulate that. I can't sit in front of discerning people like that if I don't know what I'm talking about. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, you get picked apart. They will. I think.
Because they're massively discerning. I love them. I love all. It's not a criticism against them. It's saying that you you can't go to that game. That's like going on the mat with Neil Adams when you haven't got your game ready. You know, but I know if it comes from the Holy Spirit, if it comes from God, there's no debate with it. It's just a matter of delivering what I've said.
Yeah. Well, I think it also being critiqued by people like that will force you to clarify what you're saying. And I think you know, nowadays we don't get much of a chance to defend our ideas and our ideals. Yeah. And I think challenge is always a good thing.
Well, when I did the martial arts, Paul, you know, there was nothing to challenge because it was just truth. You know, it was what I learned in the environment. It was, you know, I was doing it every single night of the week. There's nothing to defend because it just works. Mm-hmm. And I was so certain about it. There was no, you know, people may have said things, but it wouldn't have stood up in a debate because there was nothing to challenge because I was so certain of it. I'm like, you know, you can challenge this all day long. It makes no difference. I'm making it work every single night, and I'm an ordinary person.
But you put yourself out there, like for example, like the Gracies did. You know, it was an open door. Come in and challenge our belief, because it started off as a belief, and then you put it into practice.
And they do help you to clarify it, and articulate it. Yeah, you know, that's very true. If
you had said, "This is my belief," closed doors, no one challenged me. But it was.
What they do, Paul, is they bring out the stuff that you didn't know you knew, and it comes through. Like I said, there's a lovely line in the New Testament where it says, "Just turn up and talk, and the Holy Dove will speak through you." So you don't go yourself. I remember saying to Brian Rose once when I worked with him, and he looked a bit taken aback. I said, "I haven't come on my own, Brian. You think I've come on my own? You know, I've got guidance around me." And if I've got anything good to say, that's what's going to come through me. And if I go there with my personality, I'll get battered. If I go there with my own intellect, I'm not going to live with these people. So I go there with the truth that I've found, and you hope that talking to them will help to clarify that truth. Because ultimately, you want to put it out there so that it helps somebody else. It's a bread trail for somebody else to find their own way. You know. Well, they find their own way inward, not their own way outwards. You know, they say the truth's out there. It's not. The truth's in here.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to go out there to find what's in here, you know.
You need to clear it to see it clearly. And chapter 7 is after you finished your book. It wasn't. You had finished your manuscript. Yes. And this was quite a sweet chapter because it was how you met Sharon. And there was one bit in it that I thought was quite special, that when you gave her the manuscript and she read it, and then you said you wanted to be a writer, and she said to you, "Geoff, you're already a writer." So what did that do to you, and how important is it? Because I know that we talk a lot about not allowing people, not getting high on people's praise, because then at the same time they can bring you down with critique. Yeah. But I think it's important to have a few select people in your life that really believe in you and you trust.
Especially at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. And so what did
and don't forget as well that God can talk through people. So often Sharon will say things that don't sound like they're coming from her mouth.
But what did that do to you at the beginning? At the very, very start?
Yeah, it transformed my life. Because I had no internal validation. I was steeped in conditioning. I felt I was pretentious. I got enough courage from the doors to write the book and start showing it to a few select people. But I gave it to Sharon and said, "I want to be a writer." I said, "I'm trying to be a writer." When she brought it back, she just gave it me and said, "You don't need to try and be a writer, you already are a writer." But she said it as though she was saying, "Oh, you're wearing a blue top today." It was like so matter of fact. It was so, I loved her confidence, and that she wasn't bothered what anybody else thought. She just loved the book.
She saw the truth.
She saw the truth in it, and it was... that validation in the early days was really important for me, but you have to be careful because you can give it to the wrong people and they could, with my first wife, when I didn't give her my play to read, the first stage play I ever wrote, which I think was a good piece of work, I seem to remember, and I come home from work and I said, "Oh, where's my play?" And she said, "It's in the bin." And I said, "What do you mean it's in the bin?" She said, "It's in the bin." She said, "It's full of language." And it was ripped up, it's destroyed, my only copy. So that kind of thing can crush you. You think my aspirations are going to stay in the bin with those torn pages, with those ripped up scenes and lines and characters.
And at the time, this was someone that you trusted, that you believed in.
Oh man, I can't tell you. It killed me. I remember looking at it and thinking, I remember the love that I had, any love I had left was gone. It just went. It just disappeared. And interestingly, when I gave it to Sharon was one of my students at my karate class. And I said, would you have a read of it, you know? And when she said she loved it, I instantly fell in love with her. Instantly. I just loved her. I thought, I'm going to love you forever. It was just it was because I was when you give a manuscript, obviously at some level I would have left my manuscript lying around for my wife to read in the hope that she might be that she might validate it, that she might come with me on the journey. So you make yourself massively vulnerable when you share your work, because you're sharing your soul. That's what you're doing. Yep. But if I'd have known how scared my first wife was, if I'd have known, believe me, I'd have been kinder. I'd have been much kinder. I didn't realise that my spilling ambition was frightening people. I didn't realise that they were frightened of losing me. They must have saw something in there, and they were frightened of judgment by proximity. You know, just the fact that if people judge me and are embarrassed by my attempts to be an artist, then she'll be embarrassed as a byproduct. Later on, when I got a massive amount of criticism, I felt that's what happened with a lot of my senior students. A lot of them were criticised by proxy. You know what I mean? The criticism that I got, which was very savage, spilt onto them, and a lot of them just backed away, and you know, were very affected by that. But like I said, with all of the things, especially with my first wife, because she's a good girl and she's a good mum. But if I'd known how scared she was, I'd have come at it differently. But you can't have three before three's occurred, can you? You can't. Yeah. You can't know these things. It's only now, I'm writing a film about it now, actually, and it's only now I'm able to look back and think, God, she was so afraid, and I wish I'd have been kinder. I wish I'd have been more patient. I wish I'd not reacted taken it so personally.
But you didn't know it as well. You were.
I didn't have I had no idea.
Yeah. You were as vulnerable as she was.